Imagine a fortress of red brick, standing grimly on the banks of the river in St. Petersburg, Russia. This is Kresty Prison. For over a century, its name was spoken in whispers, a place of fear, sorrow, and secrets. Kresty's two main buildings are shaped like crosses, giving it its name. Kresty means crosses in Russian. But this was no sanctuary. It was a machine built for punishment, a labyrinth where hope went to die. From the Tsars to the Soviet Union and beyond, Kresty symbolized the state's absolute power, a place where people vanished, swallowed by a merciless system. The history of this prison is the history of Russia itself, written in pain and suffering. Even today, the air around Kresty feels heavy, as if the despair of thousands has soaked into the very bricks. To understand Kresty is to look into the darkest corners of a nation's past and ask hard questions about justice, power, and endurance. As we begin this journey, we unlock the heavy gates of Kresty and step inside, ready to listen to the silent tales of those who lived and died there. Kresty Prison was a product of deliberate design, built between 1884 and 1892 as a model of modern incarceration. Architect Antony Tomishko drew inspiration from Philadelphia's Eastern State Penitentiary, believing isolation would lead to repentance, but it became psychological torture. Two massive, cross-shaped buildings allowed a single guard to observe every cell from a central tower. 960 cells, each for one inmate, made escape nearly impossible. Above the gate, an inscription read, "In this house, sorrow is the only teacher." Legends grew. Tomishko, the architect, was rumored to have been locked in his own cell by the Tsar. A myth, but one that captured the prison's power. Another tale spoke of a secret 999th cell for the state's most dangerous enemies, never seen again. Whether true or not, these stories painted Kresty as more than a building. It was a living entity, designed to crush the human will. Kresty became a monster on the riverbank, its red bricks a warning to all. In its early years, Kresty held both common criminals and political prisoners, revolutionaries, writers, and activists who dreamed of a different Russia. The isolation meant to break them often became a time to think, write, and strengthen their resolve. Conditions were harsh: small, cold cells, a sliver of sky, a Bible, an iron bed, and a bucket. Prisoners developed a tapping code on the walls, a lifeline of rebellion against the crushing silence. As the Russian Empire crumbled, Kresty filled with future revolutionaries like Leon Trotsky. The Tsar's government thought it was locking away its enemies, but it was forging a generation of dedicated foes. In 1917, the February Revolution brought a brief reversal. Political prisoners were freed, and Tsarist officials took their place. For a moment, the jailers became the jailed. But this justice was fleeting. A new, even more ruthless power was rising. Soon, Kresty's walls would witness horrors that made the Tsar's era seem almost gentle. After the Bolsheviks seized power, Kresty became a hub for the Soviet secret police. Solitary cells meant for one now held 10 or more. The prison built for 960 inmates overflowed with thousands. Under Stalin's Great Terror, arrest was often random. Anyone could be taken, for any reason or none at all. Inside, prisoners faced confusion, fear, and the constant threat of interrogation, torture, or execution. Food was scarce, disease rampant, and sleep a luxury. The silence of the Tsarist era was replaced by a din of suffering. The worst torment was uncertainty. Prisoners never knew if they'd be interrogated, sent to Siberia, or led to their death. Kresty became a processing center for the Gulag, the first stop on a journey from which millions never returned. The prison was no longer just a place of confinement. It was a machine of terror. The lines between political and common prisoners blurred, and survival became a daily struggle. The psychological trauma was immense, designed to break minds before bodies. Kresty's red bricks absorbed the cries of a nation in fear. It was the gateway to the Soviet nightmare. When Nazi Germany invaded in 1941, Leningrad was besieged for nearly 900 days. For Kresty's prisoners, starvation and cold became daily companions. Rations dwindled to sawdust bread and thin soup. Men wasted away, skeletal and desperate. The machinery of Soviet justice did not stop. Interrogations and executions continued. Some prisoners were conscripted into penal battalions, sent to the front lines on suicidal missions. For many, fighting and dying in battle was preferable to slow death in a cell. Guards, themselves starving, sometimes shared a crust of bread or a kind word. Prisoners banded together, sharing what little they had, clinging to hope. Survival was a miracle, a testament to human resilience. When the siege ended, Kresty stood as a silent witness to the cruelty of both war and state. Deep within Kresty was the infamous death room, where executions were carried out in secret. Prisoners were often told they were being transferred, only to be led to a soundproofed basement. There, a verdict was read, and a single shot to the back of the head ended their lives. Bodies were buried in unmarked graves, erased from history. Executioners, like Mikhail Matveev, became infamous, some killing thousands and descending into madness. The process was cold, clinical, and repeated night after night during Stalin's purges. The death room poisoned the souls of all who entered, victims and executioners alike. It was the ultimate expression of state power, silent, efficient, and merciless. The legacy of these killings haunts Russia to this day. Kresty's basement became a tomb for hope and humanity. Its silence is a judgment that endures. Kresty's cells held some of Russia's most brilliant minds, revolutionaries, poets, and politicians. Anna Akhmatova waited outside for news of her loved ones, immortalizing the suffering in her poem Requiem. Leon Trotsky, Marshal Rokossovsky, and Joseph Brodsky all passed through Kresty's gates. Torture was both physical and psychological, sleep deprivation, beatings, and endless interrogations. The goal was often to force confessions, not to find truth. Survivors carried lifelong scars, their art and politics forever shaped by their time inside. Their stories give voice to millions of nameless victims. The fame of a few ensures the suffering of many is not forgotten. Kresty's legacy lives on in their words and wounds. Escape from Kresty seemed impossible. High walls, constant surveillance, and brutal punishment for failure. Most attempts ended in capture and severe retribution, reinforcing the prison's reputation. Yet, a few legendary escapes inspired hope. In 1922, 4 revolutionaries overpowered a guard and walked out in disguise, a feat whispered about for years. In 1991, gangster Sergei Maduev staged a violent escape attempt, exposing the system's growing corruption. These rare successes proved the fortress was not infallible. The dream of freedom flickered even in the darkest cells. Each escape, failed or successful, was a battle between control and the human thirst for liberty. Kresty's walls were strong, but the desire to break free was stronger. The legend of escape became part of the prison's myth. The 1990s brought chaos to Russia and to Kresty. Designed for under 1,000, the prison held over 12,000 inmates at its peak. Cells meant for one now packed in 20. Men slept in shifts, some standing. Plumbing failed, disease spread, and violence was rampant. Tuberculosis and HIV became epidemics. Medical care was almost non-existent. Criminal gangs ruled inside, extorting and abusing weaker prisoners. Guards, overwhelmed and corrupt, lost control. Human rights groups sounded the alarm, documenting the horror. The public was shocked by the revelations. Kresty became a symbol of Russia's painful transition, a humanitarian catastrophe in the heart of St. Petersburg. The pressure for change grew impossible to ignore. The suffering inside became a national scandal. Reform was no longer optional. Public outcry and international pressure forced the Russian government to act. Kresty was no longer fit for purpose, a relic of suffering and chaos. Plans were made for a new modern facility on the city's outskirts. The process of closure began in the early 2000s, with thousands of prisoners transferred elsewhere. In December 2017, the last inmates left. After 125 years, Kresty's gates closed for good. The city breathed a sigh of relief, but questions remained about the building's future. Some called for a museum, others for commercial use. For many, preserving Kresty as a memorial was essential. Its closure marked a step forward in prison reform, but its empty halls remain a powerful reminder. The debate over its fate continues, a symbol of Russia's struggle with its past. Kresty's red brick walls stand as a silent tombstone for countless lives. Its legacy is more than a building. It's a warning about how justice can become injustice. The stories of its prisoners, from poets to the nameless, teach us about resilience and the power of small acts of defiance. Today, Kresty challenges Russia: erase the past or confront it. Preserving it as a memorial forces society to remember and learn. The fate of Kresty is a test of honesty and humanity. In asking how such suffering can be prevented, we honor those lost and commit to a more just world.